Welcome to the United Kingdom, Great Britain, England. Whatever you prefer to call it, it has a treasure trove of amusement parks that cherish and maintain their vintage rides, along with the new. Our first port of call is on England's southeast shore, the beachfront community of Margate.
Right, come on in, Denzel. Full ahead, both. We're off to Margate.
Dreamland Margate is an amusement park and entertainment centre based on a traditional English seaside funfair located in Margate, Kent, England. The site of the park has been used for amusement rides as far back as 1880. The name Dreamland, though, was not used until 1920. The location was originally a salt marsh which would actually be underwater during high tides until 1809, when a causeway and a seawall were built. In 1846, a railway terminal was built on the site which eventually became unused. It was later converted in 1866 to a restaurant and dance hall as well as a tea room, which was the first offerings of entertainment on the site. The offerings, though, were not successful and the site was again sold in 1870. It was then, in 1870, that circus entrepreneur George Sander went into partnership to run the dance hall, then called Hall by the Sea, with the new owner Thomas Dalby Reeve, the then mayor of Margate. George Sander was the creator of one of the most popular touring circus acts in England during the 19th century. After Reeve's death in 1875, Sander became the sole owner of the hall and the land located behind it. The land behind was turned into pleasure gardens, which featured a mock-ruined abbey, lake, statues, and more. The area was also used as a breeding and training centre for Sanger's animals in his travelling circus. Not long after, in 1880, the first amusement park rides were installed. One of the first was sea on land machines, where passengers sat in mock boats and using a system of levers could move as if they were out on the sea. The concept of how these boats moved was very similar to how modern day simulator attractions operate. The park actually gained some unwanted attention at the time as a sex worker was murdered by the circus's strongman. Sanger himself died in 1911, when he was murdered with a hatchet by a disgruntled employee, and the future of the park remained uncertain, as part of the draw was from the charisma of George Sanger himself.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have assembled here today to usher in, by a fanfare of trumpets, the silver anniversary of the National Band Festival.
Eventually, the estate was purchased in 1919 by John Henry Ellis for £40,000. John, born in 1871 in Bristol, was a keen musician and cricketer and actually played for Gloucestershire. During the next years, he became well known in the world of brass band contesting. It was on a trip to the USA in 1906 where he saw the scenic railway at Coney Island. Realising its potential, he quickly worked on buying the British rights to the ride. Over the next years, he would build multiple of them throughout Britain. The first in 1907 at Blackpool's South Shore, another for the Franco-British exhibition in London in 1908, and later went on to own multiple theme parks throughout the world. The original creator of the scenic railway, who Ellis had brought the rights from, created the first chain of amusement parks, known as the Luna Parks. The original Luna and Dreamland parks, though, are going to be a topic for another episode. 1 year after World War I, inspired by the success of the Coney Island parks, Ellis renamed the UK area he had now owned to Dreamland and began construction of its very own scenic railway in 1919. This now iconic ride opened in 1920 to huge success. Further attractions were added to the park, such as the Joy Wheel, river caves, and miniature railway. The park continued to expand through the years, with the addition of a ballroom on the site of the old skating rink. Ellis invested over £500,000 into the site, consistently adding new rides and facilities, leading up to the creation of the Dreamland Cinema Complex in 1934. While Ellis would eventually run into financial difficulties in the late 30s when he created a film production company which failed, the park will remain in the Ellis family and was taken over by his son Eric in 1938.
To celebrate the 5th Easter of the war, we thought it might be interesting to take a look at a typical southern holiday resort. So we went to Margate, and we went in the old-fashioned way by road.
Most of the Dreamland site was requisitioned by the government during World War II, when the order was made on the back of the Dunkirk evacuation. The park's restaurants served as treatment centres for the wounded, and the ballroom was converted to a dorm for troops. The Garden Cafe was even used as an interrogation centre to root out possible spies.
Remember the amusement centre? Well, this is it. As you see, it's still there, but silent and deserted. The only thing was to imagine the place as it used to be, and as it will be again when peace comes back and Britain's seaside resorts are thronged with holidaymakers again.
The park eventually reopened fully in 1946 with Eric still as the manager. While the scenic railway remained undamaged during the bombings in World War II, 2 fires destroyed crucial parts of the structure in 1949, and once again in 1959. The ride was each time rebuilt. John Henry Ellis passed away on May 29, 1951. During the 50s, a new era was dawning of hope and leisure after the war years. In 1953, Lindsay Anderson's film O Dreamland captured the era of change, and Dreamland became a hub for music and fashion.
The entrance to the Magic Garden and Swiss Beer Garden. The illuminations you have read about in the press, the most colourful and artistic in this country. There is also continuous music and a fully licensed Swiss Beer Garden.
By the 1960s, which by many is seen as the golden era for Dreamland, the youth culture in the park was booming. The economy was on the up. Margate was an exciting place to visit, and Dreamland was the centre. Mods and rockers flocked to the park, and often fights even broke out. Dreamland was one of the premier music venues outside of London, with bands such as the Rolling Stones and The Who among many who graced the stage. The park would again be passed down to Eric's son John until it was sold in 1968. The park's new owners, Associated Leisure, introduced many additions to Dreamland, including once again an ice rink. 1980 saw the addition of another iconic structure, the new Big Wheel, which stood at 180 feet tall. Many people saw it as a new era for the park, but in many ways it was the end of an iconic one. The whole site was again sold to Dutch amusement park operators Bembom in 1981.
Breathtaking stuff. Bembom Brothers Margate. Pay once and all the rides are free all day. Ask at the local station for the combined train and mission ticket to Bembom Brothers Margate.
Dreamland was renamed Bembom Brothers Theme Park and promised a bunch of new rides, including a looping coaster called the Looping Star, a pirate ship, Ladybird Children's Coaster, an early multi-sensory cinema called Cinema 2000. The bars inside the park were closed to create a more family-friendly environment. The biggest change though was the addition of an admission charge, a one-time fee to get inside and you could ride everything, rather than the pay-per-ride that previously existed and free entrance. During the late 80s, multiple TV shows were actually filmed inside the park, including an episode of Only Fools and Horses. By the end of the 1980s, the park was in the top 10 visited attractions in the UK. Dreamland got its original name back in 1990, since it was mostly referred to that anyway.
Pop into any Network South East station and turn the world upside down with an all-inclusive return ticket to the Dreamland White Knuckle Park at Margate.
In 1995, free admission returned, so the changes from Bembom didn't last long. They also would be moving on, and Dreamland was again sold to Jimmy Gooden, owner of several other small theme parks in the area. Attendance within the park had been declining during the 90s. For multiple years, more and more people had been travelling abroad rather than spending their vacation time within the UK, and sites such as Dreamland suffered. While day trips to the park remained consistent at the time, the loss of the holiday trade caused the whole town to struggle. Also not helping the cause of the park was the fastest travel from Margate from London was just under 2 hours, and the park didn't offer any public parking on site. 2 other theme parks had opened closer to London, Fort Park in 1979 and Chesterton World of Adventures in 1987, and were drastically increasing in popularity. Jimmy Gooden, now owner of the park, relocated nearly all of the rides inside the park. He aimed to make the park even more family orientated. The largest coaster, Looping Star, which originally opened in 1981, was removed, and in 1994 was relocated to Loudon Castle. Rather interestingly, this wasn't the only Looping Star coaster in the park by name. The second was a Pinfari coaster, which later was relocated to Camelot theme park as Gauntlet after just 2 years. The third, in 2001, was a sister model to the original Looping Star, actually a Silver Arrow coaster made by the same creator, which had been relocated from Camelot, where it was known as Tower of Terror, and ran for just 1 year before it also moved to Loudon Castle. Wild Mouse was also closed in 2004 and again relocated to Loudon Castle. We'll be taking a detailed look though at Loudon Castle and links to Dreamland in a future episode of Extinct. Many other iconic rides were also removed, removed, such as the iconic Big Wheel, which was dismantled and sold to Mexican buyers. The skyline of the park changed drastically and not much remained to entice guests inside. Rumours began to circulate about the closure of Dreamland. Luckily, in 2002, a campaign was successful to grant the 1920s Scenic Railway Grade 2 listed status, which was actually the first time a ride had been granted this. With this announcement, it was thought the park would be saved, yet Jimmy Gooden declared the park may still close for commercial redevelopment, prompting the creation of the Save Dreamland campaign in 2003. Shortly after, the rumours were confirmed that the site would be used for redevelopment. The campaign received huge support, but the price tag for the land was deemed worth more if the park was levelled to the ground rather than an operating tourist attraction. Although it had been announced to close this year, it did operate in some capacity during 2004 and 2005. In 2005, the ownership passed to the Margate Town Centre Regeneration Company, with Jimmy Gooden retaining a 40% share. It finally fully closed and every ride was removed other than the Scenic Railway. Somewhat rather suspiciously, in 2008, part of the Scenic Railway was destroyed by an arson attack. Around 25% of the structure, station, sheds and trains were destroyed. The remains of the ride and the empty park would sit abandoned. This, though, is an extinct episode where something is actually done and the park's fate is changed, unlike so many other smaller UK parks. Out of this Save Dreamland campaign, the Save Dreamland Trust grew, with the goal of restoring the park and the historic rides and the cinema.
It was once a bustling seaside resort attracting day trippers and holidaymakers from right around the UK. But by the 1990s, Margate was heading into decline. Shops and businesses were closing down and unemployment high. However, thanks to a major regeneration programme, the coastal town is now hoping for a return to its heyday.
They received $18 million in funding to restore and preserve the listed structure, which included the Scenic Railway, cages used from the animals during the circus days, as well as the training buildings from back then also. Work began on restoring the Scenic Railway in September 2014, with a complete refurbishment of the track and new trains being built. Some historic rides from other parks were donated to the Dreamland Trust and put in storage for restoration. An additional $10 million in private funds were invested into the reopening of the park.
I hear people say that it's the beating heart of Margate. I hear that all the time, and it genuinely is. It's important for the economy of Margate. This development alone on its first phase is going to generate 250 jobs. It's going to bring several 100,000 people to Margate, and it's going to generate millions of pounds into the local economy.
The park reopened on July 19, 2015, without the Scenic Railway though, as it was still being restored. The park was run by Sands Heritage, and part of the capital they had secured was from a loan from Arrowsmith Master Fund, an investment company based in the Cayman Islands. Sands Heritage were unable to pay back this loan and were struggling. The visitors during the summer season of 2015 were half of what were predicted, and the park made a huge loss. Many of this was blamed on the delay of the reopening of the Scenic Railway. Due to the age of the ride, finding workers who had the knowledge to correctly repair it was increasingly difficult. The park was actually operating at a loss of £41,000 per week. In 2016, the park entered into administration, and a deal was established to keep the future of the park running. Its first relaunch was a huge failure. Dreamland would again be relaunched in early 2017, with a new music venue attached, with a capacity of 15,000, and featured a large festival in 2017 called Demon Days featuring the Grillers that was a huge success. It sold out in 32 minutes. Currently, Arrowgrass has complete control of the value of the assets of Dreamland. If repayment conditions were breached, Arrowgrass could apply for the assets to be liquidated. In October 2017, the park exited administration and has finally had a successful 2018. One successful aspect of the relaunch, though, was every October, Dreamland turns into Screamland. This After Dark event is one of the best scare events in the UK, offering over 7 scare mazes. This is definitely the best time to visit the park, in my opinion.
Welcome to Dreamland Margate.
It's back!
The history of Dreamland is huge, and it's an iconic place within the UK. It may not ever live up to the reputation and popularity of the past, but hopefully this will be the last time that Dreamland closes its doors. While the park is a different place from what used to exist, remnants of this historic location still live on today as a heritage park. For once, in this expedition, the park did not end up permanently extinct. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Expedition Extinct. If you enjoyed it, please do subscribe to join the expedition and follow us on Twitter for updates on future stops. Have you visited Dreamland throughout the years, and what do you think of the park? Let us know in the comments below, and we will see you next time.